Our members are not engaged is something I hear a lot. How can we fix engagement? The calendar is full and nobody's showing up. These are some of the things that I hear. And so I want to talk about, why does engagement sometimes fall off a cliff, and what can you do to fix this? Everybody, my name is Cheryl Miller, and this is ERG Strategy, the channel that helps you build effective, engaged employee resource groups and communities that make an impact. We put out videos on a Tuesday and we go live on a Friday. So if that interests you, please do subscribe to the channel. Press that notification bell so that you will find out when the next video is live. So let's get into this. We always like to start with data. I think it's the accountant in me, right? So we start with data. And when it comes to employee engagement, when I tell you that this is like the number one question that I get asked, I'm not kidding. And if I had a silver bullet, I would give it to you, right? And this would just be like, here's the silver bullet, but it's not as straightforward as that. But when it comes to data, so we did a survey of ERG leaders at the start of 2025. And in terms of challenges, the biggest challenge that ERG leaders had was balancing ERG leadership with the day job. Okay, that was the number one challenge. The second challenge was the difficulty engaging members. Okay, so the first challenge was balancing with the day job. Second challenge, engaging members. And in terms of events, so it's not like people aren't doing events, right? Typically, again, from the survey, 43% of ERG leaders said we're putting on 3 to 5 events per year. 18% of ERG leaders are putting on 11 or more events. This is events that they put on in 2024. So there's a lot of events going on. So there's a lot of events being run, but people still aren't being engaged. Engagement is falling off. So that tells me something. Events are not the answer. I hate to break it to you, because I know that for a lot of ERGs, like, you feel as though events are your bread and butter, right? The calendar is everything. And what I'm not saying in this video is scrap all events now, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, clearly events aren't necessarily the thing that is driving engagement, especially if you're not doing things like gathering feedback after events, right? We asked in the ERG Leader Survey, what types of activities did you do in 2024? And 9 out of 10 ERGs did Awareness Day events. 83% of ERGs had social events. 73% of ERGs had networking events. And then it kind of then falls off a cliff in terms of non-event activity. So only 51% of ERGs were involved in training or running training initiatives, 42% policy reviews, and then 11% other. So, ERGs are investing a lot of time in events. And I'm really not sure that the return on investment is there. The return on investment in terms of either your budget and or your time. So I think we need to do something different. So let's look at, why is it that members maybe are not engaged? Well, I'm going to offer a couple of things here. First of all, time is tight, right? Everybody's doing ERG work on the side of their desk. Everybody has a day job. And so to have the time to go and invest either in an event or something else that the ERG is doing, it means people are being drawn away from their desk job, their day job. And they're maybe not getting any recognition for it. And they're sort of thinking, well, why am I doing this? Like, what's in it for me? They're thinking, what's in it for me? I'm going to invest this time. What am I going to get out of the network? So that's maybe one of the reasons that that engagement is falling off, or that people aren't turning up for events. Another reason that I hear about quite a lot, actually, is there's something about people being frustrated with the slow pace of change. So sometimes, an ERG starts and there's a lot of fanfare and people are excited. Oh, things are going to change. The workplace is going to improve. We're going to start to see more representation at senior levels, whatever it might be. And, 1, 2, 3 years later, things still feel the same, or maybe even worse, right? Because there may have been a change in CEO or whatever, and now it feels like things are going backwards, and people are like, is this ERG even worth the time? Because actually nothing's even changed. So that, I think, is a very real reason sometimes why engagement falls off. But I want to really go back to what the purpose is of the ERG and the purpose of employee resource groups. And I want to share a story with you. I was working with a client last year. They're a pension company here in the UK, very, very large pension company. And in this training, I was running a training session for some ERG leaders, and the DEI lead who looks after the ERGs was also in the room. And the person that led the Muslim network was saying to me, we were running like we were running a monthly meetup for our Muslim colleagues. And, people were coming at first, but then attendance just really dropped off, like just nobody was coming. But what was really interesting, the DEI lead then piped up and said, very recently as a business, bearing in mind this is a pension organization, so they deal with investments. So the DEI lead said very recently, we were doing a refresh of our Sharia investment policy. So the business, the investment team wanted to do a refresh of the Sharia investment policy and asked if there were any individuals from the Muslim community, from the Muslim ERG that wanted to get involved. And lo and behold, they were inundated with volunteers. Now, why was that? Because people want to do real work. I'm always saying this to ERG leaders. People want to do real work. I'm not saying that they don't want to do events, that they don't want to come and have a good time and have food and fun, as it's sometimes called, but they also want to do real work, especially if it's in work time. And so you can imagine doing something like that, getting involved in a real business challenge, like a real business issue or a real issue that's going to help customers or clients or service users or other colleagues. People want to get involved in that because, not just in terms of, it's good for the organization, but it's going to look good for them. They're going to potentially get brownie points is just the reality of it, right? Let's just keep it real, right? So that's one of the reasons that they're more likely to get involved in something like that. So where the ERG is involved in a strategic objective or a strategic initiative in the business, people will be engaged. People want to, because they'll know that actually that has a benefit to them in their day job. It has a benefit to them in the wider organization, right? So my first piece of advice is, if you are struggling with engagement, you really need to look at what it is you are doing as a network, as an employee resource group. If it's all just events, that's not going to cut it. And people are going to get fatigued of it unless your events are really great, right? And so the one thing I would say about events is, first of all, before you've been off all of your events, do you do feedback after your events, right? You should be doing feedback. If you don't, you need to start. I'm going to include a link below to a free event feedback form that you can use. Just a few questions, no ties, no commitment or anything. You can just go ahead and help yourself to this free event checklist. You must be getting feedback. So you want to know what's working and what's not working if you are doing events. Let's park the events now, right? And then beyond that, when I say I want you to be doing real work, I want you to be doing real work. And I talk about this in my most recent book, which is called Balanced. One of the ways that I talk about looking at the whole year, I'm a big fan of the 12-week year. I'm a big fan of lots of books. You'll come to know that if you don't know me already. I like to take a really balanced approach to the year, and I look at my year in quarters. So I look at my year in kind of like 13 weeks and I break it down, and that's how I work. I work on like a 13-week basis or a 12-week year, right? It's a great book. And what I've been advising employee resource groups to do, and lots of them are doing this and starting to see benefit, is really starting to create a more balanced plan of activity. So rather than just having a calendar that's full of events, right? Or committing to, for example, one event per quarter or one event per month, my suggestion is, if you're looking across the year or you're looking at the next 4 quarters, the way you can get balance in that and know that you are tackling more than just the food and fun, right? I say just do one event in the next 12 months. Have one, what we sometimes call one hero event or one flagship event. So if you are the LGBTQ plus network, your hero event might be Pride or Trans Awareness or, LGBT History Month or whatever it be. If you're a women's network, it's probably going to be March when it's International Women's Day and it's Women's History Month. If you are a Black network, it's probably going to be Black History Month, which is October if you are in the UK and February if you're in the US. So have one event, and typically have one hero event or one flagship event, right? But then you're also going to have, maybe in the next quarter or the quarter after that, you're going to start working on a policy review. I want to see more employee resource groups working on policy reviews. You know why? Because policy, if you want these things to be embedded, if you want the changes you are making and the impact that you are having to be embedded long-term and sustainable, you've got to get these things embedded into policy and process. And policy is typically where it starts. So policy, if you want ideas for policies, maybe I'll do another video just on that. But if you're, interestingly, so when I was doing that piece of training with that organization, and the woman from the Muslim network that sort of said, I'm struggling to get engagement, she then sort of piped up. And when I sort of said this about policy, and I said, you need to be like, have your eyes on a policy. And she said, I can't really even think of what policy we would go for. And I said, well, because here's one policy that I know affects a lot of people differently when it comes to different cultures, different faiths and religions, different like belief sets, right? So I said to her, what about bereavement? I said, what about bereavement policy? And she said, that's really interesting, because actually when a man dies, when a Muslim man dies, if he's married, his wife that he's left behind isn't supposed to leave the house for, I think it was 30 days, isn't supposed to leave the house for 30 days. So obviously you can think about that. You can imagine the implications of that for work, depending on the sort of role that you do. And I was like, well, there you go, right? Something simple as a bereavement policy that is adjusted to reflect the needs of different faiths, different religions, different cultures, etc. There's all kinds of policies, right? Parental leave is a really obvious policy that really needs a lot of work in a lot of organizations, because paternity leave, leave that has to be taken by the man, assuming that there is a man involved, it's shocking, right, in most organizations. So I want you to be looking at policy. You need to have your eye on a policy. If you're not sure which policy to go for, ask your members. Again, this is about engaging members now in real work. Ask your members which policies are affecting you most. When you have like a life event or you need support in the workplace, which policies are letting you down? Which policies do you wish there was change, or which guidance? And so that's something that you could be doing as a network, and then getting people involved in that policy review. And just to clarify, I'm not talking about you as a network rewriting policy, right? Policies have policy owners. And so you would need to be working with the policy owner to be consulting with, advising, etc., to influence, to get that change made on the policy. The next thing I've got on the list is you want to have one process. So one process that, again, a little bit like the policy, but it's just the process. So maybe there isn't a written policy. So the process, for example, it might be the recruitment process, right? That's a really easy one. So there might be a recruitment process where, they pull individuals in from certain employee resource groups to get involved. Again, this is a great way to get other members involved. It doesn't always have to be the same people, right? It doesn't always have to be the ERG leader. It can be other committee members or other really engaged members of the ERG. Get them involved in things like the recruitment processes. But most importantly, get those processes designed and get the involvement of members of the community embedded in the recruitment processes. So work with your talent acquisition teams or your resourcing teams or your grad recruitment teams, whatever it be, to have almost like written into their processes that they will reach out to the different ERGs to make sure that when they go out to, for example, universities and colleges and schools or wherever it be, that they have got representation. So that's something, again, that you can do. That's a process. So we've now got one event, your hero event, one policy, one process. The last thing I'm going to recommend, one collaboration, right? One collaboration, because here's the thing. When employee resource groups look beyond the four walls of the employee network, it just seems to generate engagement and more buzz, not just for the members, but in the wider organization. So what could that look like? That could look like a collaboration with a charity, right? It could look like a collaboration with a community group, a school, another department that's within the organization. There's all kinds of collaborations. There's a really brilliant example. There's a great collaboration, I'm going to say here in the UK, but actually ended up being a global collaboration. But JLR, or Jaguar Land Rover, their REACH network, which is their Race, Ethnicity and Cultural Heritage network, had a collaboration with an amazing charity called the Washing Machine Project, who have a design for washing machines that do not require power, so no electricity required. It's a manual washing machine. The REACH network did some fundraising, got members of the network involved in fundraising, and the benefit to the members of the network, they spent time together. They went up to Scotland, they drove up in Jaguar Land Rover vehicles. So the benefit to the organization, the PR, these like branded Range Rovers driving members up to Scotland, so the PR was great, but actually then the real meaning, the purposeful benefit of designing these machines. So they designed, created, made, engineered, manufactured these machines on site. So got engineers involved and the production teams and suppliers, etc., all involved. And then these machines that were built in the UK were then shipped over to a township in South Africa. Now, this is one of the most impactful collaborations I have seen for a long time in an employee resource group. And just, literally, that had global impact. It ended up being a global project for the organisation. So you had senior leadership in South Africa going with the REACH leadership team to the township to deliver these washing machines. Absolutely phenomenal. And the engagement that sparked, not only with the members, but just across the entire organization. And that's the thing. If you can get engagement for your employee resource group across the whole organization, the members will absolutely want to be a part of it, right? And so that's what a collaboration can do, because you're looking beyond the four walls of just the employees and the members. And the broader you look, the more engagement you will get beyond just the membership. So I just want to leave you with that really inspiring story. And, if you want to find out more about that, connecting with them on LinkedIn, or just search up, JLR REACH Network. Deep Sloot is the township in South Africa that they took those washing machines to. An absolutely fantastic and inspiring story. So I hope that has been useful for you. If it has been, please do give this a thumbs up. Do share it with your ERG colleagues. Engagement isn't an easy one, but there are ways. And as I say, we're going to have a link below to the event checklist. And also, if you don't do it, a bit like we as an organisation did our ERG Leader Survey at the start of the year. If it's been a while since you surveyed your members to ask what they're looking for, send out that survey, and I think you'll probably be surprised by what you get back. So that's it for today. I will see you next time. If there wasn't anything I covered, please do drop it in the questions. I almost always forget to say that. So if you've got any questions about any of the content, please do drop it in the comments, and we'll be sure to pick it up the next time. All right, take care. Go with grace.